Hello, this is Josh from Vitality Maximized, and today I am going to talk about retracing and why it is really the only true way of healing and revitalizing your health. Before I continue, please don't forget to like, smash that subscribe button, turn on that bell notification, and comment constructively on the content produced by Vitality Maximized to assist you in your own health journey. So let us get into retracing. We'll start with what common names retracing is given in the scientific community. One of such name that is similar to retracing is what you may call the immune reconstitution inflammatory syndrome, better known as IRIS. IRIS is the unmasking of covert infections or the worsening of overt infections. They are in many cases self-limiting, meaning that it is just temporary or transient. So that is with IRIS. Another name that is typically given within the scientific community is what you may call the Jarisk-Herxheimer reactions. So basically how this came about was that Adolf Jarisk in the 1800s found or discovered, a certain temporary reactions occurred when in his work as a dermatologist, same as Karl Herxheimer in the 1900s. So the scientific community just called it the Jarisk-Herxheimer reaction. So the Jarisk-Herxheimer reaction is a transient clinical phenomenon where a reaction may occur within 24 hours. It can manifest in a temporary fever, chills, nausea, vomiting. To give such examples, it is important to distinguish it from allergic reactions or sepsis, which of course can be life-threatening. So that's describing Jarisk-Herxheimer reactions. Given that they're both similar, I will leave a link to more information where you could read up more about IRIS and where you could read up more about Jarisk-Herxheimer's reactions. And forgive me if I cannot pronounce the name Herxheimer, like it's not just, yeah. All right. There are certain other names for the everyday layman or the more health or natural health inclined, that that is given for the name retracing. The first one is obviously detox reactions. Another one is healing reactions. Another one is what we may call purification reactions in the chiropractic community, and also Dr. Gerson has used this as well. It could also be another name for it could be flare-ups, and other names for retracing can be catharsis, which you might, if you're a psychologist and involved in psychotherapy, you might have heard of the word catharsis. There is the reversal process, which is typically used in acupuncture. There's aggravations, which is typically used in homeopathy, and there is also, words like revisits. Revisits was used by the name Arthur Janov, who is the founder of what you may call primal therapy. So yeah, there are lots of different names you could give the word retracing. So what really is the word retracing, or all these other names that it can be given as? Retracing, put simply, is just going back in time. Going back in time to clear up your past so you could move forward in life. It's a bit like time travel going on in your body, like real talk. It really is like time travel. Other definitions for retracing is basically retracing reactions are: 1, symptoms that occur as the body heals deeply, and retracing reactions occur when illnesses and unresolved traumas move from a chronic state to an acute state for complete resolution. So these are the definitions you can give for the word retracing, or all the other variants of the word retracing. I'll just want to make a very important statement that, retracing reactions manifest similarly to the formation of, many illnesses and symptoms. Most of it is mild and benign and short-lived as well. If you are my program or our mineral balancing programs, typically it will be mild and pretty short-lived. However, I will warn that adding other interventions when these things occur, if and when those things occur, can easily reverse the retracing process. So I just want to make this very important statement, because retracing reaction is not something to be, you can experiment with, play around with, intervene with, like these. If these things are not managed properly, things can easily go south. So, what did one of my great mentors, Dr. Eck, mention about, flare-ups and retracing reactions? I read, and it says, quote, you could just basically read it, and I think one of the most things that are striking is that that you can't really avoid any retracing reactions that may occur if you are, doing, a mineral balancing program, because obviously if, say, a toxic substance stays on too long in the body, right, you could easily diminish the quality of your life, and you could pass it on to future generations and give them and put them on the wrong foot starting out in life in regards to their own health. I'm not really sure it's something that you would want for yourself, or something that you want for your for your future generations. So, like, the proof's in the pudding. You could read the viewpoints that Dr. Eck mentioned about the word retracing, and how often it comes up in his programs, in his protocols. So that with what Dr. Eck thought about retracing. I'm just going to shift gears a little bit and talk about why it is important. I think retracing is very important because without eliminating toxic substances from the body, your time on earth, one, is going to be very short-lived, and then two, if you want to have children, right, this is what you're going to pass down to them. and you won't, to a certain extent, you won't put your future children will not be put on the best footing forward when it comes to their own health. They'll have to, work to reverse some of the things that you were doing before they were born, because there's the congenital nature of um, of passing down stuff from parents to child, or mother to child, or and even father to child, because the sperm also has certain qualities that's important for the development of the fetus. All right, so that is why it is important, like, if really you want if you want really high quality health. So let me continue. So we're going to talk about how we can decipher that retracing is happening. Obviously, as I mentioned before, retracing reactions kind of have certain similarities with disease symptoms. They have some similarities, but I think the most important difference is what are you doing every day? How's your diet? How's your lifestyle? What's a supplementation regime? And things along those lines. So we're going to divide this into qualitative and quantitative metrics or benchmarks. So I was talking just a minute ago about diet, lifestyle, sleep, hydration, supplements. You kind of need to live a life that's conducive to healing. So that means you got to sleep quite a bit, like at least a good 8 hours, and maybe more if for naps. You need to drink enough water. Water helps with with blood flow, lymph flow, and also assisting with chemical reactions in the body. The diet has to be conducive to retracing, meaning adequate protein, phytonutrients, and generally a mineral-rich diet as much as our food supply allows. And then, in the supplement regime, we have to take into account very important metrics, such as, given that I'm a mineral balancing practitioner, such as the sodium-potassium ratio, the oxidation rate, and and support for the liver, the kidneys, and the digestive tract, and things along those lines. So I know I'm just saying these things over the surface, but if you're my client, you'll get a much deeper, a much more detailed instructions and suggestions on how you can ease through the retracing process. Second, we have to look at the changes in energy level. So retracing does require energy. Like, energy needs to be allocated towards this process. If you were better before and now became worse, this could be a sign that this can be a retracing reaction, given that the first point that I made, you're doing the best that you can, right? It's really hard to gauge, how you were feeling beforehand, because sometimes it could also be the case that if you were feeling worse and you were now much worse, right? I know this might give a negative first impression, but sometimes that could also be a sign of healing. So it's very difficult to sort of, gauge, or to use your feelings and your, state of mind, right, in determining the extent to which something's a retracing reaction. I think the first point being, the quality of your diet, how your lifestyle, sleep, hydration, and supplements is a much stronger indicator, and and can influence the energy level then, whether it were irrespective of what occurred before saying being on the program for Vitality Maximized. So it's a bit of a gray area, but we have to. But at Vitality Maximized, we'll work with you no matter the where you've been and what your journey has been like. So let us continue. The next one is any unusual symptoms. Sometimes these things can happen. It really depends on the toxic substance being released and its affinity for various parts of the body. So like, again, another gray area points to make, but I at Vitality Maximize will give you much more detailed cues to look for, where if you ever have to go through a very noticeable retracing reaction, if so. Next one, how long has it lasted? Most retracing reactions take about a few hours to a few days, most of them. If you are on my program, I'll give you detailed instructions on how to, once the retracing reaction becomes more acute. Obviously, there can be more complex cases, and depending on the complexity, sometimes some retracing reactions can take some weeks, or even a month or two. Again, there will be clear instructions for if those things last, that long or even longer. So, yeah. And then the last point to make is whether it has happened in the past. This is usually a very strong indication, just as much as the first point I made about the quality of your diet, lifestyle, and everything. Whether a symptom that happened in the past, right, is a sign that it is a retracing reaction. Yes, this can be the case, right? Because in a sense you are going back in time, so the body will revisit in its own time and in its own order, what it will address first. So, like, let's say you never had a hamstring injury. You had a hamstring injury that never was resolved. Maybe if you come on my program, you'll find that the first retracing reaction you get is maybe a flare-up of the hamstring, and then maybe a few days later, it heals completely. So these are just what's it called, things you might want to take into account of when we are looking at retracing reactions. So to just cap this qualitative part off, you gotta live a life conducive to healings. This usually is a very, very sure sign, and I will give you instructions on that. Energy level is a bit of a gray area, but sometimes if your energy level dropped, or if you were better before and if you're feeling worse, that could be a sign. Unusual symptoms are a thing if you've never experienced them before, simply because of which toxic substances get released and where and its affinity for certain parts of the body. The next one is obviously how long it's lasted. Most typically last a few hours to a few days. More complex cases might go on for like a few weeks, or maybe a couple of months. And obviously, if something's happened in your past, then that's also a strong sign, given that the first point about living a lifestyle conducive to healing, right, with the diet, lifestyle, sleep, hydration, supplements, are all, in sync. So let us continue with the next point, quantitative. Given that I'm a mineral balancing practitioner, there are, data points that are very, that is helpful and important when we are looking at, are we seeing some retracing going on here? So, and this only applies to retest hair analysis rather than initial hair analysis consultations. So I'm going to talk about the first two. I think they go a bit hand in hand, the sodium potassium relationship and the oxidation rate. So like if for instance, like the oxidation rate was from like slow to fast, right, it typically indicates that there's an initiation of stress, some sort of acute stress, and it's also a sign that you may be getting into your issues and you're sort of like in the trenches. So this can happen maybe like, I'll say for instance, right, in 2018 when I got my retest, right, my sodium, my oxidation rate was like, no, sorry, let me scratch that, and because it's not exactly the case. But what I'm trying to say is that if the oxidation rate goes from slow to fast, it's basically a sign of more acute stress and more of getting into your issues and and digging into and on the trenches as per se. If the sodium potassium ratio went from ideal or good range or high to a low NAK ratio, that's usually a sign as well, similar to a fast oxidation rate from slow to fast, that one is getting into their issues, and it's also a sign of like a lot of stress going on, like once it becomes more prolonged. A good example of this is that maybe for instance you may have an abusive parent, right? And then what happens is that once maybe you get on the program and your energy levels shift, you now have more adaptive energy to stand up for yourself and and somewhat confront your abusive parent, for instance. So this is just one of such example that can arise when there are shifts in the oxidation rate or the sodium potassium ratio. On the flip side, if the sodium potassium ratio went from low to high, or low to ideal or high, is usually a sign of something being resolved, and that means that you no longer have to go into an acute stress pattern, right? Same applies for if you go from a fast oxidation rate to slow oxidation rate. It means that things are settling down, right? And so this is just signs of so how this all relates to retracing, for instance, is that a lot of detoxification can, raise the oxidation rate and maybe even lower the sodium potassium ratio. Once you've now eliminated some of the metals in the body, the sodium potassium ratio could rise, and the oxidation rate can slows down a little bit, because those metals are not there to keep to act like a crutch to your adrenal and thyroid glands. So So there's a lot of link and interplay when it comes to hair analysis patterns. Obviously, you'll have to be on a program to actually see these things manifest. All right. The next one is the change of the hair zinc level. Obviously, zinc is very important for the production of methylthionines. It helps. Obviously, it's important for the growth of your hair, your fingernails, your toenails, and secondary secondary sexual characteristics, especially in men, and it's like the gonads and things like that. We could talk about zinc at another time, but what the importance of the hair zinc level is that at times when if the zinc level goes from, like, say, normal to high to a low zinc level, is usually a sign, all things being equal, given the diet, lifestyle, whether you're adhering to, say, a protocol of Vitality Maximized, is usually being retained for healing, because obviously we need quite a lot of zinc to help us detoxify just to help us detoxify. If the zinc level goes from, like, low to normal or high, is usually a sign that there's quite a bit of heavy metal dumping, especially its antagonists like copper or cadmium or even mercury. And it's also a sign as well that when the body is more deeply rested, when the body can rest more, and it's like what happens is that sometimes the zinc level can rise, simply because because there's more zinc available, more zinc dependent processes available to not just deal with detoxification and healing, but also to regenerate the body and to do what zinc actually does in terms of, like, the fingernails or hair growth or whatever have you. So these are just signs. This is just a sign to look out for. When you're in my program, you'll tend to understand more how the zinc levels influenced when you're going through your program. The next one is the large shifts in heavy metals, right? So yeah, any metal that goes from, like, a low or poor eliminator range to, like, an elevated range, that's usually an excellent sign that things are dumping from deep non-sensitive areas of the body, right? And if the what's it called, if the heavy metal readings from, like, elevated to, like, an acceptable range, right, that usually shows that something's been eliminated from the body. That's an extremely good sign as well. So when the body is retracing, you will see spikes in heavy metal readings, and maybe if you've gotten out of, like, a retracing reaction, you might see an elimination or some elimination of of heavy metals, which means the heavy metal readings go a bit lower. The last one, which I'll talk about, is the hair phosphorus levels. If the phosphorus levels spike, it usually indicates better protein synthesis and more healthy tissue catabolism. So, like, there's some amount of catabolism that occurs in the body that is good. People talk about apoptosis, people talk about autophagy. So this is just this is just an example to illustrate that some healthy tissue catabolism is good, and and it is manifested in a spike in the hair phosphorus levels. Sometimes in the reverse, if it goes from a high phosphorus level to a low phosphorus level, we might typically see like an elimination of lead as well, because lead tends to displace calcium in the body, and it sort of increases the need or the tissue requirements for phosphorus to act as a to act like as a defender, if you want to put it that way. So yeah, there are lots of interesting data points that indicate the extent and the level of retracing that goes on in the body. So so let us proceed. The next one is quantitative in terms of a blood test. I'm going to be pretty upfront with this. I don't know too much about the extent to which how retracing affects blood tests, but the thing is that that blood tests are only the levels and the parameters are only used for people who are in a normal range, and anything outside the range is typically, people are typically like cajoled in saying that this is an onset of a disease progression. And again, and I would like to reiterate that while retracing has certain similarities to disease progression, the difference is that those things are more temporary and transient, while say disease is disease, it builds up until things go south. So what are typical blood test markers that to look for when there's some retracing going on, given that the diet, lifestyle, sleep, hydration, supplements are in sync? So the first one is any large shifts in cholesterol. So like for instance, if you're dumping a lot of heavy metals, right, this can increase the need for the kidneys to reabsorb sodium and potassium, and this could lead to high cholesterol. Sometimes doesn't matter whether it is whether the HDL is high or the LDL is high, doesn't necessarily matter. It's just the total cholesterol. If it spikes, then that's a sign. Another sign is any large shift in liver enzymes. Of course, a lot of detoxification occurs in the liver. So, and with that, anything like the alanine, transaminase, or aspartate, aminotransferase, creatinine, a sign of tissue breakdown, all those things, tend to be a little bit elevated when the liver is going through a lot of work. Yeah. And then the next one is, a high, thyroid stimulating hormone, TSH. The reason is because, because as we're strengthening the thyroid, right, it does, as on our program sometimes, right, in strengthening the thyroid, right, it sort of increases a demand for for the anterior pituitary to produce thyroid TRH, right? I'm just going to know that's TRH so that it can arrive to the thyroid gland, or TSH, sorry, so it can arrive to the thyroid gland and help produce thyroid hormone. I'll give you a story. In 2018, I did a blood test one time, and and I had a mild high TSH, and despite being in fast oxidation, um, a mild high sodium potassium ratio, and I think I was also in three highs as well, a three highs pattern, right? So it was definitely evident that the thyroid expression at a cellular level, right, was tending towards excessive thyroid, response, while I had high TSH. So it's just basically saying that when you are, you know, retracing and detoxing, it does increase the demand of increase the demand of the thyroid. So some people like to think of it as concerning. It's not the most concerning, given that I've had a blood test before, and I've seen how sometimes it shifts, it like shifts to one direction. All right, let me continue before I start rambling. The next one is the large shifts in ferritin. So like when you are releasing a lot of iron or any other metals that use the transferrin protein, such as manganese and aluminum, there might tend to be shifts in the ferritin level. So sometimes this can be marked as a huge concern to your typical medical Joe, but in most cases it's transient. The next one will be any large shifts in white blood cells. As I mentioned earlier, the retracing can be named in the scientific community the immune reconstitution inflammatory syndrome. So some of the features of iris is the increase in white blood cell production and CD4 plus CD8 plus immune response cells and things along those lines. That's usually a sign of an initiation of stress, because in the early stages of stress, inflammation goes up, and the increase in white blood cells also go up as well. And speaking of inflammation, there can be a shift in the C-reactive protein when you are retracing and detoxing. So because when you're releasing metals from where things are stored, it also creates a new round of stress in the body. So let me continue. So retracing symptoms could be anything, but some of the most common retracing symptoms that are there is 1, fatigue, inflammation and pain, poor hair growth, hallucinations, anxiety, nightmares and unusual dreams, skin breakouts, fevers and chills, flare-ups of old wounds and injuries, and general stiffness in the body. So there are more, but these are just some of the most common ones that I've seen either in myself or in friends and contemporaries who do mineral balancing. All right, and speaking of skin breakouts, I'm going to share a little story about a situation of mine. So in 2018, right, I was doing my own program, with the diet, supplements, water, sleep, and I was also a pretty judicious user of the single near infrared lamp. One day I noticed this, as you see right here, on my abdomen. And this is just one of such ways detoxification can occur through the skin, right? Because the skin typically picks up the slack from the liver and kidneys. And in that same time period, right, I also had a couple of really frightening dreams. And I remember one where I fell off a cliff, and died in the dream, and it prompted me to wake up in the middle of the night. So during that time period, I had a couple of really bad dreams, and also this. So yeah, this is not to say that you'll ever get. This is not to say that you'll ever get things like this, right? But it's just saying that retracing reactions can take its own form, and it's pretty individual to you, if I were to put it that way. So, as we cap it off, retracing reactions are real, and it tends to be very poorly understood by conventional medicine and even most naturopathic, natural health schools of thoughts. They are extremely key to revitalizing your health. Revitalizing your health should naturally induce retracing, because this is where deep healing is prominent. I believe that this program, Vitality Maximize, offers with our mineral balancing program, can help you reclaim your health comprehensively. We still have a very generous discount that we are charging $125 per mineral balancing consultation, and it is still available up until November 1st, 2023. You still have time to lock in our mineral balancing programs at this price, and for a year, and it could save you a lot of money going into one full year. All right, thank you for your time. I just want to say goodbye, God bless, and see you all again soon.